What's up, everybody? Another edition of The Dumbest Timeline. And this week we have an awesome guest, someone that I feel like I've been doing broadcasting for a long time, but until I got to do a specific project with slash for this guest, I wasn't as confident in my skills. And then they gave me the opportunity to speak with not only a legend, but a captivating person who's obsessed with fitted caps as much as I am, Spike Lee. Folks, we have Laura Beeston on the show today. Woo woo!
Hi, thanks for having me.
So we were talking, Laura,
hmm
and the internet is ablaze with the subject that we're going to be discussing, and it almost feels too crazy. But I would love to have you introduce the subject that we're going to discuss because I feel like you are one of the few people that could tackle this with me.
That's very kind. And I am happy to give you the overview. A lot of folks are calling this the most chaotic week in the social media business in years. And of course, this is a large part to Twitter being sold to Elon Musk, who took the reins of the social media platform on October 27th. And since then, the billionaire basically has found himself in a standoff with advertisers. He announced massive layoffs of over 3,000 people via email.
Yeah.
Um, and he sort of put into practice these pretty interesting revenue ideas like charging for verified users. So that's the famous blue check mark uh,
Right.
that we all know and love that identifies sources who have been verified.
Right.
Plus, there's like a mass exodus of the people who didn't get fired who are leaving just because the working conditions are such that they can't continue at the company.
Of
So
course.
it's been chaotic to say the least. That's kind of a topo of everything that's been going down since the end of October. And on top of this, the most recent thing is that Bloomberg is reporting that Twitter could go bankrupt because Elon, of course, added billions of dollars of debt into the company's books with his purchase of the social media app. So that's what's up at Twitter.
What's up with
And
everyone else?
yeah, it is, this once a multi-billion dollar company that's kind of like unraveled in front of all of our eyes. It's on the brink of, bankruptcy. And, I just wanted to like make a caveat. It's really nice that you set me up like this, but I'm not an expert at all on
No,
social
no,
media.
no.
I'm just a Twitter user. I've been there for 12 years.
Right.
I love it. I
Right.
like getting my headlines. I like getting new voices and perspectives on Twitter.
Right.
So I'm just sort of somebody who uses the platform and is just watching in horror as it like unravels before us.
And I feel like I don't know if you remember this, but when you and I had our first one of our first conversations, not a journalist, my other show before, the
Yeah.
first episode, we talked about media and journalism, and we talked about the fact that headline culture had adapted and changed, and Twitter was one of the factors that led to kind of trying to deliver as much information in as few using the word economy as much as possible to convey as much information. And then unfortunately we saw that that got thwarted and shifted into sensationalized headlines that kind of draw attention more so than deliver information. And not just you, but with a few other people, I've had these conversations, and some of them journalists, where I said it felt like Twitter was has gone through these waves of being this really positive thing. This, like you mentioned, positive movements, information exchanges, people having really amazing conversations about things going on in the world. But it's also led to this kind of weird shift in journalism at one point, at least with the trying to people who may not have had the same training as someone like you or other journalists, but are trying to do their own quote unquote version of journalism through Twitter, where there's and no one's fact checking them. And then when people started fact checking on Twitter, people started getting mad.
Yeah. And I think SEO played a really big part of like the
Mm,
headline culture,
yes, yes,
really for the clicks. That was obviously like the aggregated headlines is also
right.
like a part of it. But absolutely, I think Twitter has become a communications and media juggernaut. It's like one of these spaces where it's been so influential
Hmm.
that I think the reason everyone is so shocked and can't look away from this, the recent news of Twitter, is because it's become such an important tool for better or for worse.
Yeah.
And yeah, we find ourselves now in this moment where it's like, what's going to happen to it? Where are people going to go if it does go bankrupt? Time.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I know I bumped into a friend. I'll give him a shout out to David Hansberry. Oh, Hansberry? I believe I pronounced that properly. David, if I didn't, I apologize. And him and I were talking about it this morning. He was telling me about Mastodon. He was telling me I told him about Blue Sky. He told me about Tribal. There's a lot of apps that are trying to fill the gap between, as there's that, like you mentioned, that mass exodus. I saw Marvel Comics reopen their Tumblr for the first time in 2 years.
Hey, that's a signal.
Yeah, like and like you're saying, big companies are starting to look around because the base for Twitter is not necessarily the safest. And
It, yeah. Also, Meta just laid off
right,
11,000 people as well.
yeah,
I
but
think it's one of those things where everyone is sort of seeing a recession in the headlights
yeah,
ahead of us. And,
yeah,
there was a huge hiring spree during the pandemic. And now this is like some sort of course correct. But yeah, I saw a comment, I forget who said it on Twitter, that said, there's never been a better time if someone wants to develop a social app or a social
yeah.
network. It's like there is white space, there is
I was
open space
I
to
was
do
gonna
so.
say, isn't like dumbest timeline aside, because I still do believe we generally live in the dumbest timeline, in
Yeah.
a timeline where and I keep using this reference, and the more I use it, the more I think it's true. These billionaires hoard wealth like dragons in
Yeah.
fantasy stories. They hoard it and they lay over it like smog, and if you try and take anything from them, they get mad. And watching all of them do this and like accumulate and pull in all these things, and then you have these little upstart Frodos running around being like, "I want to start something new and cool." And I think you're right. I think this is one of the more interesting times because we haven't seen, is it retention? Like, what is the thing that they all have so far that controls or has everyone so addicted to it? Why is it that they seem to just be able to do whatever they want and everyone just continues to only use those apps and other apps don't tend to grow? Because I that's the thing I don't, whenever I look at it, I'm always just like, whatever that spell is, because again, I like to think of it almost like magic. Whatever the spell is, it's starting to fade. And this is the time where the walls are weakening, the magical walls are weakening, and people are just like, "Oh my god, what if we could throw other." The only problem though I'm seeing is it's still the same group of people because Jack Dorsey is doing Blue Sky and like Tribal's another, no offense to you guys, but full offense. It's just another white billionaire. So,
Right.
well,
Well,
no,
I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I think there's a couple things going on here. And the first is that these social media networks are no longer upstarts. They're no longer
right.
unicorns. They've been around for a decade and a half almost. And I think that when you have a platform that's been used for over a decade, you have built up. I mean, social media looks like it's probably a very easy organization to run, but if you look at the
Mhm.
people who are leaving in Exodus, it's like, chief information security officer, chief
Oh,
privacy officer, chief compliance officer, global head of safety, global
oh
head of
god,
ad sales, like there
yeah,
is a network, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that I think that maybe the public and like users like you and me maybe don't know about or can't
yeah,
appreciate until, something like this comes along. But to your point, I think, and I didn't say this, I think I read about this in the Atlantic, but there is a structural problem in 2022 in
mhm,
that you basically have the world's richest man who decides in kind of on a whim,
mhm,
kind of as a joke, kind of to
yeah,
be a troll, you
yeah,
know, he's going to buy this huge lever of communication,
mhm,
for globally hundreds of millions of people around the world, and just like do whatever he wants with it. And we all kind of have no power to stop him. And except for the people who are trolling right now with the
yeah,
verified check marks, right? Like
yeah,
that's how I think the users are sort of uprising and, showing that they don't like the direction that this is going in.
right,
But it is. we are in this place where like billionaires can do whatever they want and they can swoop in on a tool, a communications tool like Twitter, and kind of ruin it, right? Like, and I just want to say too, everything I'm saying is like, I hope fair comment. It's not something that hasn't been said elsewhere. So
I mean,
I hope that,
I think it's very fair. Everything that we're discussing, again, this is just us like shooting the shit about this stuff because
yeah,
for me, like that's the point. The dumbest timeline is more a factor of opinion because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who don't consider this the dumbest timeline. They might think it's either one of the best. They're just like things could be worse, but it's really nice. I live my best life. But if anything, if you're someone who's living in the world right now, looking at everything that's happening, and you're just content with everything, you're definitely most likely in a position of privilege.
yeah,
And I'm not going to try and break that
mm-mm,
facade for you. If you enjoy living in that space, then sometimes that's the best that people need to do for their mental health. And
yeah,
confronting it every day would only make them sad, depressed, and would make the world difficult to live in. So I'm not going to try and
yeah.
change that for them. And then there's
There's
other.
also Oh, sorry.
Oh,
I was
no,
just
no.
about to say that there's also, people who are still attached to this idea that billionaires know best and
Right,
billionaires
right,
are visionaries
right,
and billionaires, have all of these elevated ideas.
right.
But we're seeing that billionaires can also be really bad managers,
Yes.
and billionaires, kind of act in ways that are pretty damning indicators of capitalism.
Yeah.
And they can be out of their depth, they can be mediocre executives, they can be kind of bad at
Yeah.
what they're doing, and I think that what we've been seeing since October 27th has kind of like punctured, yeah, this vision that we have about billionaires, pardon me.
Oh, you can
So
say billionaires. That's a new
billionaires.
word, and that's gonna be the title of this episode.
Yes,
Billionaires is fantastic. I don't know if you meant to go there or if
I
that was a
didn't.
full-on Freudian slip,
That
but
was a Freudian slip. But
bless it, it is one of the most beautiful words I've heard. Anyway, sorry.
yeah, the verification snafu too is like, for me as somebody who learned about the importance of fact checking and learned
Yeah.
about the importance of, you know, seeking
Reliable.
out trusted, reliable,
Yeah.
verified sources is, really heartbreaking. Like, we are losing the war on misinformation right now, and I don't think this helps at all,
I so I'm not gonna ask you to hypothesize about it, but I'm wondering, did he like, when I looked at him so I'm Elon. I go
Okay.
in and I'm a billionaire. I see that first of all, I believe in freedom of speech, quote unquote. This is something that he's always saying. Comedy is legal again. All this mentality that Twitter has become this space where people can't say whatever they want. Which, by the way, just a quick reminder to anyone who's watching this, I'm going to look you straight in the camera, folks. Just a reminder: private companies are not spaces for free speech. They are giving you the space to. Well, no, sorry, I shouldn't even say giving you. You are selling your information to them for access to the space to say whatever you want, but they still have the right to stop you because they are private entities and they can
Mm,
do what they want with their. You've signed away the terms of service and all those agreements you're signing where they tell you pretty much if you don't, and a lot of you don't read it, but if you did read it, you realize, hey, you can say things, but we can also take anything we want away from you. Also, you're giving us all this information for free, and we let you come on here, and you're going to be advertised to, and you're going to be, potentially played and forced into these little boxes as we try and figure out everything we can about you. And so
and
just
it's interesting that you say that too, because there was like, he gave users a chance to get the blue check mark that was once reserved for verified accounts,
yeah.
and then revoked it
Yeah,
when he realized that users were impersonating others and trolling him.
right?
And then he announced that anybody who is impersonating another person on Twitter, and not announcing that they're a parody account will be suspended. Meanwhile, people are going ham on this blue check thing. And,
Yeah.
someone managed to wipe something like $16 billion off of like Eli Lilly's valuation by paying
I was
$8
just
to
gonna say it.
verify the parody account and then tweeting that insulin is going to be free. So it's like, I think that when we're signing up for these things and we're participating in these things are changing on a whim
Oh
based
my god, yeah.
on And the nice thing about this is that it does show that the user base is influential in a way, and
Yes.
they do have a
Yes.
political play in this. But it's been chaotic. It's been a
Well,
chaotic week to follow all of this, and they are real world economic consequences as
yes.
well.
Can you believe someone paid $8 for a check mark and wiped out billions of dollars from a company? And the company's reaction was like, they apologize for misinformation, and it's just and, not that I care that this company that's worth billions lost a couple billion, 'cause trust me, it's not like they're going anywhere tomorrow. They still have the market on the drug. The tweet was misinformation, but it's this interesting thing of seeing misinformation used the other way, because a lot of the times the public is affected by misinformation, but this time it was one of the big billionaires that was
Yeah.
affected by misinformation, and I don't want to celebrate it because I don't like it when it's the other way. So the idea of celebrating something that's bad for me, but watching it flipped and I then laugh at them. A buddy of mine told me there's a German word for that, and I don't remember what it is, but
Schadenfreude.
yes, that's so yeah, right.
Yeah.
What it's like gaining pleasure from someone else's
Someone
pain.
else's, yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
and yes, exactly. So my buddy said that, and I realized, like, yeah, if I don't like it being done to me, I shouldn't enjoy watching it to them. But I do like that there are consequences when a company that has for a long time has been doing, charging insane amount for a drug that is needed for people to live
Mhm.
and profiting billions of dollars from it. It took $8 to cut
Yeah.
a huge swath of their wealth. And that I know I'm not supposed to celebrate, but God, I get goosebumps thinking of how
Yeah.
wonderful that is, and that very much feels like a David and Goliath moment of like and yeah, this is what weirdly enough, as much as I hate this whole situation, this is one of the few things where it feel like, "Oh, this is what we were hoping for." Like, this is the
Yeah.
type of thing where just a little bit of power.
There's a
Just
lot of examples as well about, big companies,
oh, yeah.
defense companies,
Yeah.
former presidents are getting trolled.
Yeah.
It is
Doug
one of those
Ford.
things where I feel like the Twitter users are maybe one step ahead of the
Yeah.
CEO that's running it.
Yeah.
But it brings up a really interesting idea as well that I've been thinking about, which is, you know, what is Twitter's role in responsible communication and matters of public interest?
Wrong.
And, you know, by giving everyone sort of a pay to play verification status,
Mhm.
you know, that was discrediting scholars,
Mhm.
journalists,
Mhm.
people with expertise, government official accounts, all of these entities.
Yeah.
And it is kind of striking me as a little bit like anti intellectual,
Right.
and, that facts are kind of debased, and that all of a sudden, our grip on reality is even less gripped. Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
we definitely started losing it because the checkmark system definitely made and I do weirdly, and I not to agree with him, but I do weirdly understand the idea of like everyone should be equal is what he was trying to do,
yeah, but
but
I mean,
not
at the same time, everybody's opinions aren't equal. If you're a
exactly.
subject matter expert,
Right,
you've been verified,
right,
you're a reliable source of
right.
information.
Yeah,
As soon as you discredit scholars, journalists, experts, intellectualism,
yeah,
academia, all this stuff, you're kind of entering into like a little bit of fashy territory
yeah.
where it's like, we don't need that right now. And, there's no surprise as well that like hate speech and misinformation is shot up on the platform ever since. Yeah.
500% increase of the N word on the first day when he took
Oh,
over.
brutal.
500%. I remember telling someone that and they were
Brutal.
just like they looked at me like, "Wait, what does 500% even look like?" Because to say
Yeah.
something is 100% means that there was an average use of the N-word on the platform to begin with, and then to say that it was 5 times that on the first day
Yeah.
because again, it goes to things like it's just a sense of like, oh, it's just a power move. You just get to say the words you want to say and there's no repercussions. But then a lot of celebrities, like especially black celebrities, started saying, well, I mean, if this so I'm a celebrity, I'm a doctor, I'm a professor, I'm a this, I'm an intellectual, I do all these things. I'm a person of color, I'm on this platform, I come here for discourse. And now everyone can get a check mark and everyone can use the N-word, and this is what you
Yeah.
wanted? Like this is the platform you wanted to bring up. This is how you wanted to elevate and get more advertisers and create a quote unquote free space for.
Yeah.
And it's like, but that's not how that worked. You didn't create a
No.
and it's sad. It's sad that this is what's happening to Twitter. And even when you said, because I hadn't really heard, I heard people laughing about the idea of it going bankrupt, but I didn't think it was like a serious thing. But then you said Bloomberg, which again, like you said, trusted sources, guys. It's in the name
Yeah.
in some cases. Um, yeah, the idea that it could go bankrupt is crazy to me because
Of course. Yeah. And this, I mean, one thing we haven't talked about yet too much in depth is
Mhm.
about advertisers,
Yes.
which
Oh, sorry.
are,
Yes, let's do
you
that.
know, bankrolling the platform,
Yeah.
and their new CEO is kind of telling them to hold on,
Mhm.
although all advertising spending has been, like, lots has been, not, maybe not all, but lots has been frozen
Yeah.
because advertisers are worried about hate speech and misinformation just as much as we are.
Right.
They don't want, multinational brands don't want their ads to
As-
be,
Associated.
appearing next to
Yeah.
hate speech and misinformation.
Right.
So this backfired so much
And
for
let's point out
Twitter.
real quick, and I believe multinational companies don't want to be associated with that because it's a bad look for them now. If
Yeah.
for whatever reason, in the darker timeline, way far away from this dumbest one we live in, if they could make a profit off of being next to hate speech, I would dare say they'd probably stick around with it. But, we live in the dumbest timeline, and in that timeline, thankfully there's still a modicum of respect for people, and in which case they're like, we can't you c- Coca-Cola can't advertise, even though Coca-Cola is out there destroying the world in other ways. But Coca-Cola dare not be next to the N-word or
Yeah.
misogyny or all these other horrible things, because
Yeah.
we have another bad image that we have to try and tamper down. So we can,
Right.
yeah.
And I do think, it is one of those things where, yeah, the pressure is coming from advertisers,
Mm,
the
yeah.
pressure coming bottom up from users, and
Yeah.
then there's also this third party who want nothing to do with it, which are the people who are left within Twitter who are leaving en
Yeah.
masse right now after the through more than, like, 3,700 people got laid off via email,
Right.
and the ones who stayed are like, this is crazy. I'm getting out of here.
Yeah.
And then, they're trying to call people back in, but
I
the
was
other
gonna say,
problem is,
you
who
heard
wants
about
to work with
yeah,
this
yeah.
company now? It's a really wild time. But I think all this pressure is ultimately good because it is sort of demonstrating, hopefully, to the top brass at Twitter that people do care about expertise
Mhm,
and responsible communication,
mhm,
and that they don't want to backslide into fascism and
mhm.
racism and all of this other horrible stuff that's going on. They care about their privacy
Yeah.
and their security. Yeah, and I mean, I think that you said something really interesting too about Twitter's relevance culturally and politically.
Mhm.
People are going here for the discourse, and it's really
Yeah.
sad to me that there's so many communities that have developed over Twitter that I would have never had, access to, or been able
Oh,
to read about, or been able to be taught by,
yeah.
had it not been for the platform. So I'm really
Well,
also mourning that side of it, the community of it.
crazy
Black
thing
Twitter is
yeah,
amazing.
but, like,
Like,
crazy thing for me, as a Black man growing up in Canada, in Quebec, I've
yeah,
had limited access to Black culture on a global scale, and Black Twitter was one of the first places where I felt I could connect with a community that understood me in ways that I never felt understood living in Quebec. So
totally.
it has always been important to me to Black Twitter, Black nerd spaces on Facebook. Those spaces are such a weird thing for me because I didn't grow up with them. I didn't grow up in them. But funny enough, I go on Black Twitter at Thanksgiving and there's all these memes about the plates and the serving and all the food and the culture around it. And I've seen stuff like that. Like my family, when I would go visit my godmother, rest in peace, in Toronto, and we would have all her family and all these cousins come over. And in Canada, in Toronto, I had a similar experience there doing those things as people in Baltimore or people in Alabama or people on the West Coast. And it's in the Bay Area. And I always felt so happy to know, like, oh, these are like, and in some cases, even the UK, these are like national and international like feelings and international situations and moments that we're all having where the memes about your cousin you haven't seen in a long time comes through with like the weed, and I'm just like, I don't smoke weed, but I've had family gatherings where you can tell, like, okay, these cousins are high. And like
Yeah.
when they say they're going to the park for a walk and they come back, and you're just you and I'm like laughing about this stuff. I'm like, yeah, this is stuff that has happened to me. And I didn't know that it was a thing that I would discover or feel finally connected to until I
Hmm.
had these interactions on this space. And as much as I laugh about how Twitter is falling apart, you're right. This cultural aspect of what Elon, in his weird, and like you said it before, I don't know if you said it during this, but you said it before we went on air, this hubris of
Yeah.
I'm so I'm so important as a billionaire, and I because I'm a billionaire, and maybe it also tricks them into thinking that they are smarter than everybody because they figured out the equation to hoard wealth. And it's like, you figured out how to get wealthy. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean you're the smartest person in the room. It means
Mm.
you're someone who figured out that specific equation in that situation. And that,
And had a lot of family help. Like, let's
oh
say,
yes,
like, it's not like, I
please,
mean,
yes,
this is like, aren't we talking about someone who, I don't know his background, but it has something to do with emerald mining? Like, it's,
yes, there was
this
money
is
in the
like
family,
generational wealth.
right?
Yeah. And I agree too that this, pardon me, also goes back to this idea of disdain for expertise,
Mm,
right? If you think you're the smartest person in the room, if you
fact.
think you are the subject knowledge expert on everything,
Mhm.
then of course things are going to crash and burn because obviously you're not. The smartest people in the world know that they have more to learn and they know that they need to set up their companies with smarter people than them
Yes.
around them in order
Yes.
to be successful. And yeah, I think, you can be a billionaire, but a really bad manager. I
Yeah,
said that already, but I
yeah.
think it's worth repeating.
No, no, it's a
Um,
great point.
and, I also want to jump back to this community aspect because
Mm,
I'm also very happy with the way that users are objecting to how this is all going down. But you were talking about Black Twitter, but I'm thinking even more recently about like the folks who have been mobilizing on long COVID,
mm,
medical
yeah,
Twitter,
yeah,
um, you know, even like on police
yep,
brutality. Like there's been a lot of abolition stuff, like education and awareness building and consciousness raising that's
yeah,
happened on Twitter. And especially for people who are outside those circles or those activist spaces or who don't know about, abolitionism or, defunding the police or whatever, or long COVID, because there's
yeah,
no information that's being public and like public health about sort of the effects of long COVID,
and
then
verified accounts were discussing these things,
exactly.
so people felt
Now,
safe.
if this crashes, there is going to be a need for a new venue to organize,
Yeah,
agitate, raise awareness, educate, all this stuff. And it's like Twitter is so embedded in our culture and in
mhm,
cultures, multiple cultures, that like for it to go away without something else, I don't know. I feel like that's going to be impactful
yeah,
and there
yeah,
will be a vacuum.
yeah,
And I definitely trust users and, folks in these communities are going to find new spaces, but it is a venue
yeah.
that I think, you know, if it goes away because of a bunch of terrible decisions that were made in a span of 2 weeks, like that's a pretty big deal. Yeah. So I don't know. I feel that for people who use Twitter, even like me passively, just to get a sense of what is being said outside of, media circles or
Mhm.
outside of my usual suspects,
Yeah,
it is a big loss. I'm gonna miss Twitter if
yeah.
it used to go downhill. And
It's one of
so
the it's one of
we'll
the
see.
only platforms that I've ever seen where it mentioning when someone says I'm a Twitter user, you don't get that sense of their age also. I feel like it's
Mm,
the only social media where because when someone says, "Oh, I did that on Facebook," you're like, "Okay, you're older." Someone says TikTok, you're younger. Someone says Instagram, esque, maybe a
yeah,
little younger. But Twitter is one of those ones where I feel like it's the whole spectrum. All ages are on Twitter, or at
yeah,
least that's how it appears to me. I could be wrong. Once again, this is the dumbest timeline, and we don't need to be experts to have a fun and interesting opinion. And if you don't
yeah,
necessarily agree with us, join us on social media and talk to us, and hopefully we'll still be on Twitter. Um,
yeah.
but yeah,
The other thing I just want to say before we leave is
yep,
that, we had 11,000 people that were laid off of Meta.
yeah,
3,700 people are laid off of Twitter.
yeah,
And you've got all of this talent that
yeah,
now is circulating, that knows the secret sauce, that
yeah,
like understands how these applications work.
yeah,
So, I mean, my hope is that perhaps there will be some sort of decentralized, especially with Web3 that's coming in and
mhm,
people are like really rethinking how we use the internet, that hopefully there will be some sort of development in a
yeah,
way that isn't top down and isn't sort of at the whims of billionaires, where it could be something that's maybe more grassroots and
right,
community and bottom up. And
yeah,
I don't know what that looks like yet. There are like a lot more smart people or smarter people than I who have just been laid off who can probably
yeah,
figure
yeah,
that out.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm really hopeful that, some if this thing goes down in a fiery,
Blaze of glory. Yeah.
chaotic, like in a car crash we
Oh
can't look
no.
away from, like hopefully, something else, another model will eventually present itself by necessity,
Yeah,
um, or by community,
yeah.
which
Just
actually would maybe be the best thing ever, because that is what kept Twitter so relevant and amazing for so long, was all the community. So
yeah.
I'm hopeful, but
Hopeful. Fingers
right now,
crossed.
like what the
Yeah.
ugh,
Again,
crazy.
it's not necessarily that we wanna watch the car crash.
No.
We don't even want the car crash, but it very much feels like it's happening. You're seeing the driver lose control. You're seeing all the parts in the car start to, like, fall to the wayside,
Uh-huh.
and you're just like, by the sheer acts of the gods on high, whoever they may be, whoever you believe in, please save it because the driver might not be the smartest, but that car doesn't deserve to get destroyed, and that's how I feel about Twitter.
Yeah, that's good. And you
Yeah.
know what? I also think that when something is collapsing, you got to mourn it, but
Yeah.
then you got to rebuild.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
or it's something fades away, something else comes through, and
Always.
change is the only constant. So I'm like looking at this with just, I mean, part of it is entertainment value, part of it is like also a cultural or community sort
Yeah.
of, global thing. But yeah, I'm very curious.
A
I'm
fun
very curious
unifying
and hopeful about
yeah.
where we're going next.
Fun
So
fun
hopefully it's okay.
unifying conversation is being had around the world.
Yeah.
Laura, where can people find you on social media and check out your stuff?
Oh man, I would say Twitter, but
Yeah.
it's one
Yeah.
of those things where all I'm doing lately is retweeting on Twitter. I like stopped using it like super actively, so probably
Yeah.
LinkedIn. I mean, I'm kind of stepping back and just observing at the moment,
Alright,
but I
alright.
guess if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Laura
Alright.
Beeston.
Perfect. Folks, as always, I say this at the end of every episode. We do not live in the darkest time, just the dumbest one. But that doesn't mean we can't hope and aim for better. And hopefully, you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in to another edition. We'll be back soon.